The thing that made me fall in love with Dallas was...
In college. We met in college.
We did. We met in college, and it was, I mean, it sounds a little cheesy, but we both experienced a little bit of love at first sight. He was a junior in the theater program that we were both in. I was a freshman, and there was a day where the freshmen watch all of the upperclassmen do auditions for that season's shows. And no matter how much you love theater and are excited to be a theater major, watching a full day of auditions is not fun.
It's brutal.
And the room was getting dark, and everybody's energy was low and tired, and you know, anyone could have napped at any moment. And then on the stage walks this guy in a purple shirt and sings the most amazing song, and it was like a breath of fresh air for everybody. All of a sudden the room had life in it again. It was like, oh my gosh, thank God, somebody's got it. And I just remember saying, man, I gotta meet that guy. The guy in the purple shirt, he was just fantastic. I really admired his audition. He was just so filled with life that it was contagious. You know, it was like he literally changed the atmosphere of the entire room.
So a couple days later, we were actually at the school bookstore, and I saw her, and I walked up and I said her name to her. I said, "Hi, are you Meg?"
And I went, "Oh my gosh, you're the guy in the purple shirt."
Yeah. And then we had a fortuitous meeting a couple of weeks later where we were at a theater event together, and we sat down and we actually sat down at a big boy restaurant, a Bob's Big Boy restaurant. And we ended up talking for like 4 hours. And I walked away from that conversation saying, I think I just met my wife.
Shared values, shared dreams, shared belief systems, shared goals. It was like everything that both of us had ever desired for our life and our future. I could see it with him. Like, oh my gosh, this is the guy I've prayed for my whole life. You know, here he is sitting across the table from me. It was really an amazing and frightening feeling.
It was a frightening feeling at that age. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I felt the same way. It was like, this is the woman I've been hoping for and praying for my whole life. So that's who we were before. And then we got married, and a year after marriage, we moved out to LA. Before depression started, we were just living the life. I don't know. I mean, we were going to work. We were doing the thing. We were chasing dreams. We were in the entertainment industry. And so
we were playful.
We were playful. We went out more frequently. But I would say one of the main contributors was that the hustle never ended. And so we were chasing the hustle. And for me, it was like it was that carrot that was always out in front. And so while we had more playful engagement, I think there was always this thing churning in the back of my mind, like I have not yet achieved. And so it felt like this thing that if I capture it, then life will be better. And because that was uncapturable, for lack of a better term, because it was uncapturable, it felt like that happiness kept getting more and more distant from me. So I don't know about for you.
Wow, what was life like before?
There were no children.
Yeah, initially. And then even when the kids first came, there was just more peace, I think, in the home.
Little subtle things were happening, and it was because in me, I was getting more desperate to attain, as I was saying. And so that's when the shift started happening, and it was like the more desperate I became and the more scarcity minded I became, like, what if I never attained this? That for me is when some of the spirals started happening. I never was thinking of it as symptoms, and I didn't think of it as depression at the time. I just thought of it as like, God, life sucks. And life sucks was making me angry. So I don't know from your, because you were the first one to say, do you think you might have depression?
Yes, for sure. Well, he went away in his eyes. He wasn't there anymore. So I would look at him, and I would make eye contact, and I would say, honey, where are you? I don't see you in there at all. Like, where have you gone? Come back to me. And there would be moments where he would be there, but most of the time I couldn't even find him. It was like this man became unrecognizable to me. And
it wasn't the guy who lit up the room that she fell in love with.
Yes. And
it was a different guy.
the extreme heaviness and the simmer. You could always feel the boil beneath the surface. So I walked on eggshells for a long time, and we did have a son at this point and another on the way. And I can just remember like feeling like I didn't want to disrupt this, because if I did, then there could be a big explosion. Something had set him off. It was 9 o'clock in the morning, and the trigger happened, and the explosion happened, and he made this he made this giant pancake, and the way he sat down and started just putting it in and like.
I actually looked at her and said, "I know exactly what I'm doing right now, and I don't care."
It was
That's
a wake up moment for me, because I just thought there's no amount of pancake right now that's going to make him feel better. There's no amount of my prayers that are going to help. There's no amount of my encouragements, because I tried to be the bright encourager. Like, let's look on the bright side. Let's focus on gratitude. Like, the steady calm. You know, I really worked hard to do that, and I worked hard to try and control, to a certain extent, your atmosphere. Like, well, if I could just cook healthy meals, and if I could just encourage him to exercise, and if I could just be everything that he needs in this moment, we won't be struggling in this way. And so watching him eat that pancake, it was like the blindfold went off for me, and I was like, there's nothing I can do. There's nothing anyone can do. He needs professional help. Like, there's no amount of pancake that's going to fill this void. And so that day I researched, well, I called our insurance company first to find out, is mental health even covered? If so, what's in our plan? What's available to us? So I took those steps, and then I began researching based on what the insurance company sent me. Providers in our area, are they taking new patients? So I did all of the front work in that regard, and then I essentially came to him later that day, later that afternoon, and I said, I've picked 5 therapists in the area. You can choose from these 5, but that's your only choice. Like,
I didn't actually get a choice.
Yeah, the choice is
it was
not
not a yes or no.
getting to go or not getting to go. It was, these are your choices. Pick one.
So I sat down with my therapist, his name was John, and he started just asking me a series of questions. And I didn't know he was actually like doing a tally. He was doing a score. And so by the end of the questions he was asking me, he simply showed me that I had tested in the 95th percentile for major depression and severe anxiety disorder. He actually had asked me a couple of questions too, as far as like, my anxiety levels were so high, he wondered if I had PTSD, if I had been a soldier or a sexual abuse victim. And I had not been either, but I scored so high on it that when I finally saw the number, I was like, whoa, okay. Mm-hmm. There is something that needs to be addressed, for lack of a better word.
I can remember you showing me though, and it was almost like it brought you some relief to know.
Yeah.
Like a diagnosis, you know? Oh, something really is wrong, and now we can begin to, it's almost like you can't solve the problem until you've discovered the problem. So it was like, oh, the problem is real, it has a number, it's on paper now here with a doctor's name in front of it, and now what's the solution?
Well, it started with going to therapy a couple times a week.
Yeah.
And it was one-on-one talk therapy, and he was very good. He created a very comfortable environment for me, and I know that there have been friends of mine who have had to try out 2 or 3 therapists until they find the right person. I was blessed in that I found somebody I was comfortable speaking with. And what we realized, though, was after, it was probably 7 or 8 weeks of therapy, we weren't getting the breakthrough that we wanted, that he wanted more than me, because I didn't know what to expect. But because he was hearing some of the same patterns over and over again, he said, look, we're not getting a breakthrough here, and actually your thoughts, while you've become more aware of them, I don't think they're serving you at the moment. And so then the discussion began of, he was a psychologist, he wanted to put me in touch with a psychiatrist to do medication for a while. Medication for me, though, was definitely a sign of weakness, a perceived sign of weakness, I should say. Because therapy was like, oh, I'm already admitting to a weakness here. Now you're telling me I need chemical help outside of the talk help. And so I begrudgingly agreed to do the work. And so I went and I saw the psychiatrist, and she started me on a couple of different medications, one anti-anxiety and then one an antidepressant. And the anxiety medication was more of an as needed for panic attacks sort of thing, but the antidepressant was a daily thing. But it was a situation where medication takes usually about 3 weeks before you can start feeling the effects. So I was just kind of in this void while we were waiting to see if it worked, and it didn't. And so the first medication I was on, I actually got worse, and it got scary.
Very, very dark.
Very dark. There actually, it was the first time there was some physical things on my side where I actually started cutting, which I had never done that in my life. It wasn't something I did as a teenager or anything. But I just needed to feel. And so I had gone to the psychiatrist and said something's wrong. Like I felt bad. Now I feel broken. And her response was, then you're on the wrong medication. Like it was a very simple, and it was actually a very comforting response. She was like, this isn't the right medication for you. We just need to try something else. Hang on with me. She started putting me on something else, and it worked. And it was it was about another 3-4 weeks. But what happened was, rather than these massive highs and massive lows, it just kind of evened out, and it allowed me to begin to process things from a place of clarity that that the up and down chemistry was not allowing me to process.
All during that time, he was distant, he was separate, he was trying to make the progress with the therapist, but, you know, hitting these roadblocks, and then there was hope in the medication. And when we didn't see anything happening there, and then when it got darker, it was like, oh my gosh, is nothing gonna work? I can remember just feeling desperate myself. And
it was me and you.
It was, and I would take the boys to the park, and I would get them to school in the morning, and I did the grocery shopping, and did the meat, like I did everything. And so to hear the shift where he says we, where we begin to come back together as a we, and it was almost like him learning to re-enter the family dynamic, and to be present. And you know, before that, there was part of me that was like protecting the kids. You know, I don't want them to see this side of daddy. I don't want them to have memories of this, or why is daddy asleep, or why is daddy mad, or, you know, why is daddy any of these things?
Why is daddy sitting there with a blank look on his face and can't play with us?
Yeah. My experience with dealing with mental health, what would be the word?
The industry,
providers, doctors, psychiatrists and psychologists, because I was handling everything. He couldn't handle anything, so I handled it all. And there were a few points, especially in the beginning, where it was like, I'm not sure this is working. I know you said I need help. Oh, now I have to go see a psychiatrist and get medicine. What's this going to cost? Those are very real questions to ask. Yeah. And there was a cost, but I remember saying to Dallas, we can't not afford this. You know what I mean? So we'll find a way to make it work. And insurance covered, I don't remember specifically, something, but then we paid out of pocket something, and that something was...
Yeah, it was percentages. I don't remember the exact percentages.
And with John, with the psychologist, it was a lot. And I can remember having a conversation with him and just saying, if we pay out of pocket, can you give us a cash rate or based on your income rate? And he was able to do that. So we were able to get the amount lessened, and it became something that was more affordable, because when I can remember when I first saw the numbers, I was like, oh my gosh, maybe we can't afford this, but I can't let him know. I'll find a way, you know? So I would say in my experience, the providers were willing to work with us, which was encouraging. And even there was one medication that the psychiatrist prescribed that was not covered. And it was going to be like $700. And I remember we went back to her and just said, there's just no way.
Yeah.
This one isn't covered. Is there
these 12
something
pills.
similar? Yeah, is there something similar you can do? Because even if we could come up with this, it's not sustainable. If he's going to need this long term or even short term for a period of months, it wouldn't have been
Right. So
sustainable.
she was able to get us a generic brand that was covered within the
Scope of the plan.
the scope of our plan. Yeah, which was helpful. One of the interesting things that had happened too was early on we didn't talk about it outside of us and our therapists and that extreme close group. And then there was the night that she spoke with my brother about it. So that was the first time. But I remember the first time we actually brought the larger family circle in and I started to tell other siblings and my parents about it. And we had developed a language, but they had not. And so that actually was a very, the conversation was not as smooth as I thought it might have gone because, and no offense to my parents, but they were like, what did we do wrong? We're still married. We're still this. We're happy. You were happy. It was a good childhood. You weren't abused. Like,
Yeah.
why are you depressed? You of all people. And I remember another person in the family saying, well, you just got to think differently. And so in their best efforts to love, they didn't understand. So for me, with my current mental health, the word I would use is vigilant. I just have to be vigilant about it. And there are specific things that she knows if I've been eating wrong for a couple of days, if my carb intake is too high, my sugar levels are too high or whatever, that's going to cause a potential, not spike, but spiral.
Nice.
Exercise is huge. The times that she looks at me and says, hey, will you go throw around some weight? Can you go to the gym and lift some?
You need to go to the gym.
Go to the gym and lift some heavy crap. So that's
It's when
definitely.
that little burn starts again.
Yep.
It's. Can I chime in here?
Please. No, you're not allowed to chime in at all, my dear.
I'm chiming.
Go.
I think one of the most amazing things that we gained from walking through this experience is a language to talk about it and to be able to identify when we see those patterns or those disruptors. And so sometimes I'll look at him and I'll be like, babe, the monster is like knocking on your door. I can see it. Like he's right here. So we need what's going on in your life? Then we can start to ask these questions. And what can we do proactively to get the monster off your back,
I don't know if this is simply because I have chronic depression, but it feels like it's always lurking or near. And if I'm like, I see you, it doesn't get close. But the moment I the moment I choose to ignore and allow just life to start happening, and I remain less vigilant, then I tend to hear that train coming down the track, that monster sneaking up, that cloud coming overhead. For us in our darkest time, she was able to call my brother and she was able to say, I can't talk to anyone else about this, but you need to know what's happening with Dallas. And we were able to lean there. And the other thing too, so he and I were able to start talking about it, and he was able to support her and say, what do you need, Meg? Do I need to fly out and help with the kids so you can get out of the house for a little bit, whatever that might be. The other thing though is, Meg mentioned this earlier, at the beginning we didn't have a language for it. We didn't have a language to talk through the various metaphors. We didn't have a language to talk through really present moment awareness, really to talk about what I was feeling and the spiral versus an upward mobility. And there was just a lot of, we didn't even know that I was having panic attacks at the beginning. I thought I was having heart attacks. So education was key. Understanding that momentum is built moment by moment. And so you can have that positive momentum happen in your life. And realizing that journey just takes time, step by step, day by day. Through the dark, you will get to the light place, and brighter days are ahead. So if you keep those things in mind, and then also just keep in mind, you have to hope.